The movie begins with a breaking news report of a rainstorm in the United States. The storm, which only occurs once every 100 years, has completely paralyzed all activities, including telephone and internet networks. The scene then switches to a bus transporting prisoners. Inside are 5 prisoners with different cases who have been categorized as dangerous criminals. But without realizing it, a group is planning a rebellion with the sole purpose of freeing one of the prisoners. Meanwhile, at a police station in the Louisiana region, rainwater has inundated almost the entire room. The worsening storm completely paralyzed all access to communication. On the other hand, the rebel group was ready for an ambush. They planned to tail a bus of prisoners on their way to their jail cells. On the other hand, the sheriff named Joanna began protesting against her subordinate, Marcus, who was ordered downstairs to check the sewer.
I'm on it! I'm on it!
However, Marcus was completely unaware that 2 crocodiles had entered the office. Unsuspecting, he continued with his inspection. When he first entered, everything seemed to be going fine without interruption. However, when Marcus saw the security camera cable break, he immediately rushed to fix it. His focus was distracted, not realizing that a crocodile was following him from behind. With knee-deep water, Marcus couldn't do much. Unfortunately, the only flashlight he had was dropped. In an instant, the crocodile pounced on him. Meanwhile, the bus carrying the prisoners finally arrived. Their arrival was further hampered by the increasing rainfall. However, there is no other choice, the prisoners must be locked up immediately. Joanna agreed to the surrender, and all the prisoners were immediately ordered to disembark. Just down the road, a team of rebels was on standby, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sheriff Joanna is known as a strict figure and always cracks down on prisoners indiscriminately. However, the prisoners who had just arrived showed a disrespectful attitude towards her. Until then, it was not certain which one of them was the target of rescue. Suddenly, the rebel mission was put into action. The front of the police station was destroyed by a barrage of gunfire. Joanna and her men couldn't do much about the chaos. One of his men even lost his life in the middle of the office for daring to fight back. A similar fate befell one of the intruders. However, their leader, Rafe, didn't care. He let his men die in order to continue his plan. Rafe and his team immediately take Joanna hostage and bring her to the prison room. As it turns out, their goal was to free a prisoner named Russell. Russell is known as a violent prisoner who has killed 69 policemen in 5 years. As a result of his crime, he was sentenced to 69 years in prison. Before leaving, Rafe ordered one of his men, a woman named Eva, to check the security camera server. Eva was then taken by Sheriff Joanna downstairs. Unfortunately, Joanna did not realize that Marcus was dead. At that time, Joanna was curious why a flashlight was seen coming from the water. When she checked, instead of finding a flashlight, she found a floating hand. Instantly, a crocodile emerged from the water, leaving them both cornered. In a panic, various shots were fired against the creature. However, there was no way out. Eva had to accept her tragic fate. Due to the sound of gunfire, Rafe immediately goes downstairs to check the situation. When he arrived, he immediately realized something was wrong. He sees Sheriff Joanna soaking wet, but his attention is drawn to something far more dangerous, an alligator. With no other option, they were forced to run back to the jail cell. Unfortunately, the people there still don't realize the threat that lurks. As soon as the door opened, Rafe's foot was suddenly ambushed by a land crocodile. Not only that, but the beast also pulled him out with great force, dragging him away in an instant. Rafe's men began to get annoyed with Joanna, while the prisoners were deliberately released to fight her. Since earlier, they had been unable to bear the sight of Joanna. However, they are no match for the sheriff. In an instant, Joanna manages to defeat them single-handedly. Seeing Joanna's greatness, all the remaining prisoners finally chose to defend her and turn against the intruders. However, instead of continuing to fight, they decided to make peace and find a way out of the place. At this point, they realized that escaping through the door was no longer possible. Inevitably, the only way was to go upstairs. One by one, they began to climb up to the ceiling. However, the prisoners were completely unaware that a crocodile had made its way into the room. While the others had already made it upstairs, one prisoner was just preparing to climb up. Unfortunately, he slipped and fell. In an instant, the crocodile pounced on him, making him its next prey. They all then rushed to a room. Once there, Sheriff Joanna immediately ordered them to split up. This time, Joanna chose to go with Russell and a prisoner named Jay. Without wasting time, the three of them immediately headed for a warehouse. However, when they got there, Joanna didn't give any orders. Instead of preparing for the situation, she was busy chatting with Russell, as if she was starting to take an interest in him. Unfortunately, as a result of this negligence, crocodiles began to arrive. Without warning, one of them quickly pounced on Jay, making the situation even more chaotic. In another room, chaos is inevitable. It all started with a prisoner secretly working with one of the intruders to find a sacrifice for the crocodiles. However, the situation changes drastically once Sheriff Joanna arrives with Russell. Without hesitation, they take out the intruder, while the traitorous prisoner falls prey to the crocodiles lurking in the darkness. Amidst the panic, one prisoner desperately tries to tame one of the crocodiles. At first, he seems confident, but eventually, he becomes the next victim. Suddenly, Rafe appears out of nowhere. He was still alive. Seeing that, Joanna didn't leave immediately. Instead, she borrowed a gun to finish off the crocodiles. However, Rafe had other plans. He intends to leave Joanna just like that. Russell, who saw this action, did not accept it. There was no other choice, the two of them were involved in a fierce battle. Meanwhile, Joanna cleverly lured all the crocodiles to one place. When the time was right, she fired a bullet into a gas cylinder. A powerful explosion ensues, and thanks to that, Russell manages to survive Rafe's threat. At the end of the movie, the rainstorm finally stops completely. The sun begins to appear in the sky, signaling the end of the long terror. At this moment, Sheriff Joanna and Russell choose to part ways. There will be no more arrests because, in the end, they both need freedom. And so the movie ends.